In today's show, we're going to talk about Power Apps responsive layouts. Are you tired of having to choose to make an app, whether it's a tablet or a mobile, and then having maybe even have two apps? Well, in today's show, we're going to talk through how to use the new layout controls to start building through and making your apps actually responsive. And this is probably one of a 3 or 4 part series where we're going to kind of break down the different pieces. But today we're going to talk about the fundamentals, how these controls work, what they're capable of, and demo some of the stuff we're going to build in future videos. Should be fast, should be fun. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with Power Apps 911. Those guys. And today, we're going to talk about Power Apps responsive layouts. And so if you're not familiar with the term responsive, that just means that it resizes dynamically based on whether you're on a mobile phone or on a desktop or, kind of somewhere in between. So what we're going to do is Microsoft's introduced this new layout container. So I'm going to break out the 2 new containers for you, explain how they work, and start to introduce you to the different settings available, right? There is so much here. That's going to be the biggest challenge of these responsive apps, is there's a million zillion things you can do. And so what you're going to have to learn is all the different buttons you can press and then learn to start to put them together. That's where I've been really struggling with, right? The first one I built, it worked, it was responsive, but then I was like, oh, now I see I could build this better and better, right? And as I've done it over the last few weeks, I keep getting a little bit better at it each time because I start to think about the different ways to apply the different things. So my goal today is to expose you to all the different buttons you can press, give you some of these hints. And I guess maybe we should just switch over to my desktop and let's take a look. All right, so the first thing I think we should do is preview an idea of what this does. So if you're still like, what? That's cool, right? So if we go here and we say, hey, I want to preview this thing, what you're going to see is that I have layouts are magic. No. So this is an example of my app running at full width. But what's really fun, and they've added this now, is with the preview, if you have this option up here chosen where it's allowed to dynamically size, if we grab this and we start to pull, the app is automatically resizing itself. And look at this, it's getting smaller and smaller. Oh, my font changed and the stuff disappeared. Now it's stacking on top of each other. And if we get even smaller, you can see that it, stacks a little more. And finally, then it goes to like a full-on everything is stacked, right? So this is really interesting. But the idea here is that no matter what your size is, you're going to be able to redo this as you need to. And that is what you're after, right? So pull us back over here. And so now that we kind of see that that looks like, what I wanted to also show you, so I'll put up on the screen, here's a shot of it on my phone with my phone turned up and down, right? So vertical. And so you can see on my phone with it vertical, everything stacks the way you'd expect. We could scroll. I don't have it live, but you could actually scroll up and down. And all that happened dynamically. Or if we switch my phone to horizontal, then now that my phone is horizontal, you can see that it's using more of the real estate, right? It's scaled out to the width as well. So there is a lot of really interesting stuff here. And the idea is that basically everything I've been able to come up with so far, I've been able to build. Like I said before, I built it one way and I'm like, oh, what would have been better? Do it this way. And I think, that's one of the challenges you're going to have here is you're going to have to think about these, and it might take you 3 or 4 tries to really get it to do what you want, or to get it to do what you want in the least amount of steps possible. Doing these efficiently, that might be a long way off for all of us. Okay, so that's enough of kind of a preview of what it can do. So what I thought we'd do is start by talking about how to actually start to make some of this. So the first thing I actually want to do before we come back over here, and I would also like to point out that these are all individual controls. These are not forms. It's another thing that's kind of snarked me a little bit about some of the different demos I've seen out there. Is the form control does a lot of things magically for you, which is awesome. But in most of the apps I build for production solutions, I can't use forms. I got to use individual controls and patch. So I just am kind of skipping over the whole forms world, right? Here, I'll show you right here. So this is one that's a form. So if we say preview this one, and so what you're going to see is right now it's a 4 column or 12 column layout. But if we pull this one over, the form automatically went to a 3 column layout, and then the form will eventually kind of figure out itself. Now it's 1 column, there's a 2 column. And it's a little, like as I'm pulling this sideways, right, this is not all perfect. I just threw this together as fast as I could to show you that forms will do all this hard stuff, or most of this hard stuff for you, but we're just not practically going to be able to use forms all the time. So that's why I don't want to spend any more time on forms. Okay. So let's first build our app. So if we go over here, I guess I should say new app, and we're just going to do a canvas app. And then I'm just going to go ahead and choose a tablet layout. So this is, getting our first app. Now, once the app creates, there's a couple things you want to do, right? The first thing you want to do, well, first thing you really want to do is probably name the app, right? So app responsive video, right? And then always remember to save. Remember, autosave doesn't happen if you don't turn on save. So we'll make sure that save's happening so I don't lose any of my work. Okay, so now that that's done, what I really want you to see was second thing you're going to do is file, settings. And so here on the screen size and orientation, you're going to see all the normal stuff. But so now we're finally going to kind of get into these little buttons. And so long story short, these scale to fit and lock aspect ratio, this is what's made Power Apps kind of dynamic-ish for a long time. Not dynamic, but it basically dealt with whether you're on a big monitor or a little monitor, or even if you try to look at a desktop app on your phone, these settings kind of help that not be as terrible. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to turn these off, because this is what's going to let you start making responsive. Now, also at the bottom here, lock orientation. So this is one that they didn't explicitly cover in the guides, but the idea was, as soon as I got on my mobile phone, the first thing I want to do was go from this way to this way, and I'm like, it doesn't do anything. The reason for that was this lock orientation. So I doubt that you're going to want lock orientation, so I've been turning this off by default in my responsive apps. So now we're going to say apply. And so now we're ready to build. Okay, so we're going to go back over here. And so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to insert a container. And this is one of those mistakes I made the first 27 times I built one of these apps. Is what I found from talking to Microsoft and some other people is that if you go to the little plus here and then go to layout, really what you're going to want to do is install one of these two containers and make it take up the whole screen to start. So choose horizontal and we drop it over here. And I'm going to grab it. I'm just going to pull it across. But this doesn't actually do what you want, right? This is actually, if you look, you can see that right now my container's width is going to be 1366. That's not really what I want. So what you're going to do, you're going to have a lot of parent issues in this thing, right? But you're going to say, hey, I want you to be parent.width. So whatever width the screen is, I want you to be that wide. And then for right now, we'll go ahead and say for the height, same type of thing. However tall the parent is, I want you to be that height, right? My kids want to be as tall as me. I'm 6'4". Do you know that? I'm a really tall guy. My kids want to be as height, have parent.height as well. So hopefully they get there. All right. So now that you've got parent width and parent height, now this has made this container responsive, right? So it's going to adjust to the parent's width and height. Now, if you look at the parent, right, what is the parent of this container? It's the screen. And so if you go look at its width, it is max app width or app min screen width. So this setting right here says, hey, basically I don't want it to ever be any smaller or any narrower, I guess, right, in like my midsection, than the mid-screen width. So this is important because you're like, well, how do I know what that is? How do I set that? Well, it's trying to tell us app dot. So I go up here to app, and so min screen width, easy for me to say, is 320. So this is saying as narrow as I'm going to let this thing get is 320. But you can control this. So if you're like, hey, I don't want this app to ever be any more narrow than 1024 or whatever it might be for you, you could change this, right? All these settings are changeable, but the defaults so far have been kind of what I've been rocking with. And then you can see min screen height has the same. You don't see a width and a height here. That's because they're dynamic now, right? They're following whatever amount of space they have. They're taking up all their space. Okay, so that gets us ready to go. We got a container on our screen. So then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an insert, and I'm just going to throw 3 rectangles in here. And I'll explain why in just a second. So insert, and then a rectangle. There's a blue one. And then we're going to insert another one right there. And then finally, I'm going to insert a third one. So insert a third rectangle. Okay. And then what I'm going to do to make this easier on us, I'm going to change the color. So I'm just going to change this one to be this pretty green color, and then this one to be this pretty red color. Right? So now we can see we've got 3 things in here. And you notice as I added these, I didn't drag them out there and put them anywhere. They just snapped into place. That's the container at work. This is a horizontal container. And so when you add controls, it just automatically stacks them up. Now, what if you want the red in the middle? No big deal. You would go find the red one, which is this one. You can hit the little thing here, and there is reorder now. And so then this lets you move it to start, move left, move right, move to the end. So we can rearrange. So that's how these go, right? But when you have a horizontal container, as we add things, they just go sideways. Now what you might want to start to look at, so I'm going to click on the container itself over here. And so here we've got this justify. As you can see right now, they are justified to the left. So if I click on the middle, they go to the middle, right, they go to the right. Or if I do space between, then they fill out the space, right? So people like me have a hard time with alignment issues. That's a big win right there. I just think these things automatically fill the space. So that is where they go left to right, right? Justify horizontal. Align now vertical. So right now they're sitting at the top. I could have them go to the center or the bottom, or the most interesting one, stretch. And so this is what we call fill. It's interesting to call it stretch there. They call it fill in other places. But this says, hey, take all the space that you've got vertically and fill out that space. So that is how you start to manipulate how these behave in here, right? So we got these kind of filled out. So let's just go back to more of a standard. We'll go like left and top, right? Back to where we started. So that is going to let you control where these go in here, because that's really what this is going to be about. As you get better at these, we're going to end up having containers inside of containers inside of containers, right? Nested containers. And as a part of those nested containers, it's going to really be about understanding where they position. But these settings control where these go. Now, what's interesting up here though, notice they have direction, horizontal and vertical. So there's actually no difference between choosing horizontal container and vertical container here. It just sets the default for this dropdown. What's also really interesting is they reuse all these properties, which I almost think is a bad thing, but I'm not here to judge. But why that's interesting, so notice right now, so if we do horizontal and then we'll do middle, okay? If we change this, notice this is justify horizontal, align vertical. Change this to vertical. Now it's justify vertical and align horizontal. These settings are not specific to the direction. If we go and look at where, I prefer to look for things, right? Click on the container here, and then like a layout, align items. So this property is saying, hey, regardless if you're vertical or horizontal, whichever one you are, set the alignment to be centered. That's why they're centered this way, but if I change it back to horizontal, now they're centered this way. Because these settings are not unique to the direction. They're unique, or they're just set for themselves no matter whether you're going horizontal or vertical. So that's a layout align items, and then layout justify content is the same thing. So that's the first interesting thought. And why this is going to come up is in later, probably video part 3, when we start talking about conditionals of this. Like if you conditionally change from horizontal to vertical, which we're going to do in that video, then we also have to go and maybe change the layout alignments or the justifying from one setting to another based on whether we're currently at a horizontal or vertical. So there's going to be a lot of if and conditionals that kind of cascade the same way. So I thought that was interesting. So another one, right, and just to show you like crazy. So there you go, horizontal, and if we go to vertical, right now we get the stripes. All right, so back to this is our base setting. So we also have this thing called gap. This one I keep forgetting about, if we're being honest. I forgot about it in my practice this morning. So the gap, this lets you control how much space goes between the different objects inside there. So gap of 10, they now have a gap this way, boom, boom, boom. If we go to vertical, then the gap is this way, right? Same type of thing. It's a universal setting. But so this is how we start to kind of create space between these. And this is where I really like the rectangles, because they make it so much easier to visualize than if you do your testing with the labels or things like that. Because then you kind of, you're like beholden to the font taking up all the room. This fills out that all the area it's got. Makes my life easier. Then you have horizontal overflow and vertical overflow hide. So this is, hey, if you end up giving me too many things, right? So if we added, here, we'll just copy and paste, Control C, Control V. If we just add all these, look. So right now we have this thing set to hide horizontal overflow, and I added too many things, and so all the things I added, you just can't see them. If I change horizontal overflow to scroll, now I get a scroll bar so I can scroll all the way to the width, right? So this is how you control whether or not you want scrolling or hiding stuff that way. Also, though, what has been a lot more fun for me, and I'm surprised it's not turned on by default, is wrap. So let's delete all those extra containers, or a bunch of them. Oh gosh, wrong button, Shane. Let's try this again. Oh, apparently deleting is hard. Yeah, I'm gonna delete some stuff. You notice normally you're like, Shane, just multi-select. Oh, maybe I can. Some of the multi-select stuff doesn't work inside containers. I assume that one didn't. It does. Okay, anyway. So now the other thing you might do here, though, is wrap. And so this is the one I've been having the most fun with. So if I turn wrap on, and now if we start pasting in our rectangles, look, now they just go to additional rows. Oh, I can maybe make it a calendar view. Or remember on my cute little app over here, right, where I was like stacking all these are all wrapping, right? That's how I'm getting these to go to different lines depending on how much room there is. Because what's fun with this, so here we can do, right, if we do play, if I pull this in and I run out of space, look, it wrapped to another row and another row. And so I start to get all these rows, and then if I go too big, notice we're missing these. Why are we missing all the stuff at the bottom? The reason we're missing all the stuff at the bottom is because we had vertical overflow hidden. We turn that back to scroll. Now we can finally see this thing in action, pull it over. Oh, look at that. We got too narrow, and now it wrapped and it scrolls. And that's how you have dynamic screens. Yeah, that's the cool part right there. That's why I'm really surprised wrap is just not turned on by default. But what do you do? Okay, so that is the settings of the container, right? I mean, it has other ones, but those are the ones that you care about. But this is interesting, right? You need to understand that these are the container settings, because now if we go click on the little blue guy here, we're going to see that now when you incorporate an object inside of a layout container, that it gets a new little section here. And so in this case, what we're going to see is we have the ability to control the height and the alignment in container, and then the width and this whole flexible width thing. So we have some different settings. And once again, as you might be not surprised, right, just so you see it before I go there, if we go back here, we change this to a vertical, go back to our rectangle. Look, now width and aligning container is this way and height is this way. So what you see here depends on the type of container, or the direction, not the type, the direction of your container up here. So we're going back to horizontal. So now that we're here, right, so this is where I was controlling the height. So if I change this to be 200, right, I gotta quit saying right. Dang. So now you're able to make this one a little bit taller. So it's taller, 200, so you can change all of them. You can start to play with it. But the height is really a static thing in this particular setup. And the alignment in container, usually you're going to say set by container. But if you're like, no, you know what? This particular one, I want to change it. Here, we'll change the red one now. So we're going to change the red one. And so now it is centered. So even though the parent, right, the container itself actually says to do a line at the top, now we've said, nope, don't follow that. Do a custom setting just for this one. That's the way this is going to work. The other one here you might notice is we have a line and container, and so we still have this whole stretch idea. So if we stretch it, then it would fill out whatever space that row had. If we go to this guy, we say, hey, stretch you. And so then now we're actually saying stretch to fill as much of the height as that particular row will offer you. That's going to come into play later when we start stacking containers more, because we want to have one container like take a set amount of space, another one set amount of space, and then the middle one, maybe that one we just want it to fill out whatever space is there. But you can control this. So this is another interesting piece of this puzzle. We'll just set these back to set by container, set by container. Okay, so that's the height in our horizontal. Now flexible width, this is a little bit different. And what this is going to do is this allows you to say, hey, I want this particular control to take as much space as it can get. So let's delete a bunch of these again so we can kind of make our space. We'll go right here, right here. Shift, whatever. Delete all these things. Delete more. I need an intern to come in here and delete all these for me. Okay, got them all deleted. Whew, I edited that out. That was way harder than it should have been. So what you might look at now here is if we go back to our red guy, and so you can see right now his width is 150. If I change it to 250, he gets bigger. If I change him to 400, he gets bigger, right? Yay, no surprise. But what I might do here is say, hey, I want your flexible width. So if I turn this on, now what it says is this row, right, has so much space, yay, space. And is it having that much space? This one, the blue one, was set to use 150 pixels. The green one's set to use 150 pixels. But this one says my minimum can be 150 pixels. But what I really want you to do is take all the extra space that is left over. So if we preview this, now it's giant. And if we start to pull it in, blue and green, they stayed 150. They're both fixed size. He just uses the extra space. So much so, pull this back over here again, that we could also say, you know what, and your minimum width is only 25. Like that. So then now if we do this and pull it in, you'll see that he can even get really tiny until now I've gotten to my minimum app width. So that is how we can control some of the different settings around height and width. We have this ability to set a combination of how much space do you use, so you have a minimum width, and then fill portions. Maybe I want to have him and green both do the same thing. So we go to green, we turn on fill portions here. We say you're also 25. I don't know where I can't put 25. But so now they're both sharing whatever space is left over. You're like, well, you know what? I really want red to be have 2/3 of the space, or 80%, right? So maybe what you do is say, hey, I want you to have 4 fill portions. This also was not very obvious to me. So you set it to 4, and then Power Apps automatically figures out, well, I have green set to 4, red set to 1, so that's 4 of 5. But now if we preview, you can see it take up space, and if we start to pull it in, red is still sizing, but red is 20% and green is 80% of the available space. Giving you, once again, the ability to really kind of control what you do with the sizing here. So those are fill portions. And right, you can never edit this number. I was like, I want to make this 10. You can't. I would just make this one 8. So now we're 8 of 9. I go to the red, make you 2 of 9. And now I've got 10 portions to fill. So that's how you adjust that, and which is the same math as 4/5, right? Or 80%, whatever, math. Whew. You overworked? I feel overworked. But these are the things I wanted you to start wrapping your head around, because you need to kind of understand that container has its own settings, and then children of containers, they have their own settings, but these settings vary based on the direction of their parent. Because then eventually what we're going to do, we'll just do it right now real quick, but if I go in here and say, hey, I want to add another container, so I'm just going to throw a, doesn't matter, horizontal container in here, right? So now we have a 4th object, but now that we have this 4th container in here, what I really wanted you to see was this container, let's go back to this view, he's a child, so his child, he has these settings and these settings, just like his other siblings. But because he can also be a parent, he has these settings. And that's where we start to get into nesting. We're not going to go any further into nesting today, but I want you to see that that's what's going to happen when you start putting containers inside of containers. Because if we go back over and look at this app real quick, you're going to see that I've got a whole screen container. I got a container for the top, the middle, and the bottom. My middle containers then have a whole bunch of additional pieces. And then even this last container, oh, I thought that one had a container inside the container, but you're going to have a lot of nesting. So don't start with nesting because it'll make you crazy, but I wanted you to see it, and I wanted you to start to poke the bear a little bit, start to think a little bit about this. Now, other things that you should know about in this kind of intro video, if you do new screen, there are some new options down here, split screen, sidebar, and header, main, section, and footer. And they will lay out 3 containers for you. And so here you can see where I got the idea around the parent, the whole screen has a container, and then there's 3 children. So you can start to play with it and use it inside their designs, which once again is always great to, if nothing else, to get your brain going of what's possible. See how they did it. Go look in click on this one and be like, hey, what is your height? Well, your height is 200. Oh, but you have flexible height turned on. That's why no matter what we do, this middle section will kind of move. The other thing that I did a lot of is I would just go say, hey, I want to take this section and make it one of these colors. So then now I can kind of see how it would move. And if I grab and pull the bottom, look, the top and, oh, I went too small. The top and the bottom, they both have their thing, but this guy just got smaller. So that's how that works. And so if you were trying to figure out how they did it, well, by turning on the colors, I could better visualize it. And then once I was able to visualize it, then I was better able to like go figure out where I'd want to go figure out, oh yeah, look at you. Flexible height is on. And it's 1 of 1, so it's the only one with flexible height on. I know that right away. Also, all these properties are over here. So fill, that's the color, but fill portions, that's the whole 1 of 1 in this particular scenario. Or if we went back to our other screen and we clicked on this one, like, hey, what about you? What are your fill portions? Right, that one's 8. So, okay, I think that's enough for one day. I've said right 724 times. I apologize, it just got stuck in my head. But as you go look at this, this was part 1. So when I post part 2, I'll put a link somewhere on the screen, right? So I'm holding up a 2 so I can find this later. But so part 2, what we're going to do is we're going to dive in and we're going to build our first responsive component, which will be very similar, if not exactly, this layout bar. Because one of the neat things I did here that we'll talk about in the next one is as we shrink, right? Notice there's an image here, notice there's words here. As it gets smaller, these disappear, the font size change. And so we're going to incorporate breakpoints and some different logic to kind of do those. And then hopefully after we get through that one, I will finally feel comfortable enough to show you how this whole screen works. But it's hard. I don't know how else to put it. There's a lot of logic. The good news is, though, I know some of you are skeptical on these still. One of my employees is still very skeptical. But so far, everything that someone's thrown at me, I've been able to build. And I probably built it wrong, but it worked, right? So I mean, and by wrong, I mean, I probably had 75 steps where I could have done it in 5. But that's okay. There's going to be a learning process here. We're going to rethink this again and again and again. But I think we're going to get to a point where we're like, wow, I can really do this. And the idea of this screen is that now that I've got it all framed out, I can add sections in here, snap, 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 and just make this thing scale, which is really like our first customer app that's responsive. This is what they kind of wanted, was something like this. So that's why I built that. Oh yeah, and don't forget, if you're a subscriber over at training.powerapps911.com, you can download this fully working app, even with all this layout magic screen already in there and working. So you can just start reverse engineering my code and get ahead. So if you're not a subscriber over at training.powerapps911.com to the curated library, this might be the perfect app to get you there. Also, if you have any questions, comments, things you want to see me cover in future videos, leave them below. I read all the comments. I respond to all the comments. It might take me a week or 2 sometimes, but I try to keep up with all the comments. So, awesome. All right. With that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day. Before you go, be sure to click on the subscribe button over here so that way you'll be notified when new videos come out. If you need any help or you want to work together, whether your problem is big or small, check us out at Power Apps 911. We do it all. I rhymed. Or if you're looking for more formal training offerings, we have those linked up here somewhere. So check them out. Thanks and have a great day.